had their headquarters. They based themselves right behind me in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which they made their palace. And they built this porch. They added it on to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And we can see in this porch the first flowering of the style of Gothic architecture that achieved its full fruition in Chartres Cathedral. A new departure in building and a new departure in human thought, engineered, originating with the Knights Templar. Everything about them is mysterious. They seem to come from nowhere. In the early 1100s, a group of 9 rather obscure knights goes to Jerusalem, manages to get itself established upon the Temple Mount, takes full control of the Temple Mount, doesn't allow anybody else in there. They were searching for the Ark. There could be no more precious religious relic than the Ark of the Covenant. If they could acquire the Ark and bring it back to Europe, then their ambitions to achieve power, secular power, would be fulfilled. With this object in their hands, they would be absolutely unstoppable. One of the strongest Jewish traditions has it that the Ark of the Covenant is buried somewhere here in the caverns and tunnels that lie beneath the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount itself, for centuries, has been a political minefield, impossible for archaeologists to work beneath. But in one period, the Crusader period, when the Templars, the Knights Templar, were in occupation of the Temple Mount, they used that opportunity to dig beneath the Temple Mount in search of the Ark of the Covenant, I believe. Suddenly, they stopped. It's as though they learned some new information.
Hancock believes the Templars met with an exiled Ethiopian prince who sought refuge in Jerusalem. His name was Lalibela. At the Ethiopian temple in Israel, Patriarch Matthews confirmed Hancock's suspicions.
Lalibela informed the Templars that the Ark of the Covenant was in his country, in Ethiopia, and I believe a deal was done. They wanted the Ark, he wanted to become king of Ethiopia. They were a powerful military order. He said to them, put me back on my throne and I will give you access to this object. And I think that's what happened.
Evidence of the Templars' influence in Ethiopia abounds, particularly in this city, renamed for the exiled prince who became king, Lalibela.
This exciting discovery in Wolfram von Essenbach turned my mind back to a mystery that had puzzled me years before, the incredible phenomenon of the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela. Churches carved out of solid rock on a gigantic scale, conceived in the mind of a master architect. And there were legends that these churches had been built by white men. Could those white men have been Templars? Look, here on this roof, the double cross of the Knights Templar.
New technologies.
As Graham Hancock delved into the legend of the Ark in Ethiopia, one indisputable fact remained. Historically, the legend of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba couldn't be true. Hancock began searching for the historical process that could have taken the Ark to Ethiopia. In the tunnels and caverns of the Temple Mount, built by King Solomon for the Ark, he found a clue in the tale of Manasseh, a pagan king who defiled the temple and filled the streets of Jerusalem with Jewish blood. Below the city, Jews lament the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the first and second temple. But few believers know of the existence of another temple in ancient times. A third temple built by refugees from Manasseh's persecution, who took their cue from a verse in the scriptures.
There will be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar near its border. And taking its cue from this verse, in the time when the king Manasseh paganized the temple in Jerusalem, a group of disaffected priests fled to Egypt and set up a replacement temple at Elephantine.
best bet for the site of the Jewish temple is just over there, underneath that rubble of thousands of years. What we're seeing there are the remains of the Temple of Khnum that was extended on top of the Jewish temple, but that's where the Jewish temple lay. And over here, very close to it, we see the habitations of the Jewish military colony, which extended down here and along the edge of this hillside here. It's a theological puzzle that this temple was ever built. In that period, which was a period of extremely hardline religion, there were no other Jewish temples anywhere in the world. The whole concept of Judaism was focused upon the temple and upon the ark. Therefore, for another temple to be built only becomes comprehensible if that temple was built to house the ark, and that's exactly what I believe happened.
How long did the ark remain here, in your opinion?
In my opinion, the ark remained here from 650 BC, the time of Manasseh, until 410 BC, when this Jewish temple on Elephantine was completely destroyed.
By 410 BC, the Jewish priests and mercenaries at Elephantine were allied with the king of Persia and hated for it by Egyptians. When Egypt rebelled against Persian rule, they razed the Jewish temple. The Jews of Elephantine were forced to flee. They could not go north back into Israel, for a hostile Egypt blocked the way. More importantly, a welcome back in Israel was no longer certain, for Israel itself had changed dramatically.
I believe that the Jewish faith based in Jerusalem had evolved during the centuries of the absence of the Ark from Jerusalem. We have to remember the Ark is taken out of Jerusalem during the First Temple period and brought to Elephantine in 650 BC, certainly according to the way that I reconstructed. What happened after that, another 70 years later, was that the First Temple in Jerusalem was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, and the Jews were carted off into exile in Babylon. There they began to worship an incorporeal deity, a deity who had no physical presence in any one place, but who was everywhere, intangible and omnipotent. During this period of exile in Babylon, the Jewish religion evolved into the kind of religion that it has become today. And I believe that it was only here on Elephantine, where the Ark remained secure, that the old form of the Jewish religion was maintained. So, for the Ark to come back to Jerusalem at this time, in 410 BC, would have created further conflicts with between the established priesthood in Jerusalem and the established priesthood here. So, all the motivations point to a journey to the south. Not north through a hostile Egypt to a Jerusalem that no longer wanted the Ark, but south. South towards Ethiopia, following the Nile River system, away from these burning deserts, and into the green highlands of Ethiopia around Lake Tana. This is a Christian country and a Christian island, but they have a powerful ancient memory of a time when they were Jews and when they conducted blood sacrifice. On Tana Cherkos, they told me that the Ark of the Covenant had rested for 800 years. That when it was first brought to Ethiopia, it had been brought to that specific island and placed there for safekeeping. That it had been the focus of worship for a people who at that time were entirely Jewish, and that for 800 years it had remained the focus of their worship. And they showed me altars that had stood before the Ark of the Covenant, in front of it, where the blood of the sacrifice had been poured. Suddenly, all the gaps were bridged.
The dawn of Christianity ended the worship of the Ark at Lake Tana. Ethiopia's new Christian king wrestled it from the Jews and took it elsewhere. Ethiopia belonged to Christianity, and perhaps to the Knights Templar.
This church is dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and that is not an accident, because the Virgin Mary was a figure of great significance to the Templars, and this church was built by the Knights Templar, and it is full of mementos and memories of the Templars. Look here, we find the croix pâtée the cross of the Templars. And here, up above, set in a Star of David, also a Seal of Solomon, a perfect Templar cross, painted red as the crosses of the Templars were painted 800 years ago. The whole place is full of these memories, and if we come around here, we find something quite remarkable. If I'm not mistaken, what we see up here is an image of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. And strangely, spectacularly, it bears on its domes crosses. There was only one period in history when the Al-Aqsa Mosque was decorated with crosses, and that was the period of the Templar occupation in the 12th century.
As Graham Hancock continued his search, he discovered another vital clue linking the Knights Templar with Ethiopian King Lalibela. It was a strange inscription carved on this church pillar, which no one is allowed to see.
Could you at least tell me what is written there behind the cloth?
አምስቱ ቃላት ሳዶር፣ አላዶር፣ ዳናት፣ አዴራ፣ ሮዳስ አምስቱ ቅንዋተ ተመስቀል።
Sator, Rotas. These words, Sator and Rotas, were of special significance to the Templars. They form an anagram, in fact. They read the same in reverse. And we find these words on a Templar property at Gisors in France.
These are the exact words of the Templar cryptogram. All words can be reversed both fore and backwards, both horizontally and vertically. The words of tenet form a cross and mean in Latin, "It is held." And rearranged, the letters twice form the Latin words of Pater Noster, our Father, with an A and an O left over, Alpha and Omega. To the Templars, these were the names of God indeed. As Hancock braves the underground passages of a rock-hewn church, he recalls an eyewitness report of a European geographer who visited Ethiopia in 1207.
He tells us that the Ark of the Covenant was carried in procession by men who were white in complexion with red and blonde hair. No Ethiopians look like that. Those men who carried the Ark in procession in Axum were the Templars. Attending Timkat in Axum is like making a journey through time. The dance of David before the Ark of the Covenant, that is described in detail in the Old Testament, is replicated in full life. The antiphonal chanting, passing voices back and forwards, all of this plunges us back into the Old Testament world.
During the festival of Timkat, every one of Ethiopia's 20,000 churches parade replicas, symbolizing the Ark in procession through the streets and villages. Here in the ancient city of Axum, a special casket wrapped in a costly veil is displayed. Many believe it is the true Ark. Yet the guardian of the Ark remained behind in his sacred temple, as if the real Ark had not come out at all.
The Ethiopian Orthodox Church is literally unique in the world. There's nothing else quite like it. And it's a very pure and simple form of religion in its own way. I hesitate to say this, but almost paganistic in its reversion to the worship of the Ark of the Covenant. Paganistic, but filled with a powerful belief in God and the presence of God hovering over Ethiopia itself, brought there by the Ark of the Covenant. It's the unshakable belief of the Ethiopians that the Ark of the Covenant, the embodiment of God, is here in Axum. There was a time when I dismissed this idea as preposterous, along with everyone else in the West. But a small incident during a vacation in Chartres led me to a string of discoveries which now convince me that the Ethiopian claim is true and that the Ark indeed survived here through many centuries of turmoil.
So is this the true Ark of the Covenant? Could there be a grain of truth in the legend of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba? The evidence may never be confirmed, for religious law prohibits anyone from disturbing the relic. Without proof, the Ark of the Covenant must remain simply as a powerful symbol for Ethiopia. It is the heart of their church, the rock of their faith, and the hope of their people. Next time on History's Mysteries, we go high above the Dead Sea, beneath the feet of desert nomads, to where is supposed to lie the treasure from a time of war and destruction. 2,000 years ago, as flames engulfed most of Palestine, a desperate band of religious scholars hid their most sacred scrolls and texts in the desert wilderness. These ancient documents reach back to biblical times, to the very fundamentals of the Jewish and Christian faiths, shaking them to their very roots.
Scholarly battles over the interpretation of the Dead Sea Scrolls as History's Mysteries continues next.